What questions should you be asking if you're considering bringing a lawsuit on behalf of your business? My name is Andrew Ayers. I'm a business attorney with offices in Edina, Minnesota and New York City. And today we're going to talk about 5 different things that you should probably be considering before you bring that lawsuit. Now, as a business owner, a lot of what you do involves contracts. You're involved with customers, with vendors, with clients, whoever you're involved with. A lot of times they're going to have some kind of contract that you want to deal with. Whether it's just simply an invoice, whether it's a statement of work, it could be a formal contract that's 50 or 60 pages long. Whatever that looks like, that tends to be the foundational document that takes care of your relationship with somebody else. And the question is, what do we do when something goes wrong under that contract? Is it time to file a lawsuit? Are there other ways we can sort this out? What you don't want to do is just immediately run to the courthouse and file a lawsuit on behalf of your business. An initial problem may be that you might not be able to even do that, because as you may know, businesses need to be represented by an attorney. So rather than pulling that trigger immediately, let's take a step back and look at 5 different things that you should analyze as to whether or not you should really bring a lawsuit. First thing is, do you have evidence to support your claims? Now, if we're looking at this, is there evidence that they didn't perform under the contract? Is there evidence that somebody broke into your store and stole something? What kind of evidence do you have? Do you have documents? Do we have emails? Do we have admissions? Do we have a phone call, maybe a voice message or a text message? There's all these different things we want to look at that can be the possible source of evidence for a lawsuit. If you don't have any evidence, you may be thinking, how am I going to bring a lawsuit? Well, evidence doesn't have to be something written down. It can actually even be your testimony. You can have lawsuits where it's simply Jim Smith says this and Jane Doe says that. There's no evidence, there's nothing in writing, and at the end of the day, it comes down to the judge to decide who's right and who's more credible. But we prefer, when we look at lawsuits, that we have something in writing, something that everybody knows about, something we can look at, especially if there's a jury, so we can figure out who's right, who's wrong, and what happened in this case. So one of the first things to do is look at that evidence. Make sure you've got some things to support your claim. The next step is why it's important to talk to a lawyer, and that is, what does the law say in your state? Or a federal court. But whatever you're dealing with, you need to look at, what does the law say? You may think you've been wronged. You may say, I can't believe this happened to me. But then the law may say, well, even though it happened, you're not entitled to any damages. You don't get any money. Or you get one of those crazy verdicts you see in the news that says, oh, you won this whole case, it took weeks, and your award is $1 in damages. What do you do then? You spend $100,000 on lawyer's fees, on a trial, on expert witnesses, depositions and discovery, all for $1. That's why you want to ask this question at the front. And that naturally flows into the third question we ask, which is, have you suffered any damages? Let's say somebody breached the contract. Let's say, and I've talked about this before, that your contract is for 1,000 gray widgets and you're going to put them into a car. But instead the company sends you 1,000 silver widgets. It's the same size, it fits perfectly, everything else in the car works, except for the fact that deep inside the engine there's a little tiny part that's gray instead of silver. Has the other party breached the contract? Technically, yes. Have you been damaged, though? Probably not. As long as these little widgets are working, the color probably doesn't matter. So that's what's called not a material breach of the contract. It's a breach. Technically, somebody breached the contract, but you don't really have any damages. Maybe your customers will never even look inside that engine and know that it was gray instead of silver, or silver instead of gray. The fourth thing to look at is, does the other party have a defense? So let's say you say they breached the contract, I can't believe they did it. But then we look at the contract and say, wait a second, there's a force majeure clause that says if certain events happen, then that party doesn't have to perform. Or maybe, like it's been recently, we're having problems with the supply chain and they were unable to get the parts. And maybe your contract has a provision that says if they're unable to obtain the right parts, then they don't have to ship them to you and there is no breach of the contract. There can be a variety of different defenses, and you can see other videos on my channel that discuss the defenses you may have to a breach of contract. It's very important to understand what those defenses are, because although you may be able to bring a contract, they may have defenses that mean you don't actually win a lawsuit. And the final thing you need to consider, number 5, is, can that other party actually sue you? Now you may think, what? I didn't breach the contract, they breached the contract, I didn't do anything wrong. But you never know. They may have other things they can sue you for. It might not have anything to do with the contract, but they may have that right to bring a lawsuit against you. And by you starting a lawsuit against them, they say, you know what, we're stuck in court anyway. I'm still mad about that thing that happened 3 years ago, so let's sue them too. Let's have a counterclaim for them for something that happened a while ago. Now, by bringing your lawsuit, and maybe you don't have a ton of damages, you may have exposed yourself to a countersuit that actually entitles them to more money than you're going to win. And so by bringing a lawsuit, you're going to pay all that money for an attorney, and you're still going to owe the other side money because their lawsuit is worth more than yours. Now, this isn't a complete list of issues you should look at. There's a lot of different things that can happen when you're creating a lawsuit and deciding whether or not you should sue somebody. So it's important to work with professionals on things like this. We want to work with those attorneys, work with those financial advisors that can tell you whether or not this is even a good financial sense to bring these lawsuits. This is not something you want to do yourself. As I mentioned before, companies cannot represent themselves in court. So if you're running a business and you need to bring a lawsuit, you're going to have to speak to an attorney anyway. So while you're doing it, sit down, talk to them for an hour or two, go over the evidence, go over the claims, discuss what the law is. Have there been damages? Are there defenses the other party has? Could you be sued on a counterclaim? These are all things to bring up with an attorney, so you make sure before you bring that lawsuit, before you spend all that money on an attorney, you know what you're getting into and that it really makes sense for you and your business.